story recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain a drama, horror, and mystery film called Shut In. Spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. One fateful afternoon, melancholy fills the household of Richard and his wife, Mary. Richard's son and Mary's stepson, Stephen, is forced to go to a boarding school because he has turned into a troublesome teen, leaving the boy upset with him. Richard tries to reason with Stephen on the road, but that only infuriates his son. Stephen then becomes aggressive and argues with his father while he's driving, causing them to collide with an oncoming truck. 6 months later, Mary wakes up and heads to the kitchen, seeming exhausted from her routine. She then opens the curtains in Stephen's room, who's now in a vegetative state. In the living room, Mary pushes Stephen in front of the television before going to her clinic. As a psychologist, Mary works with adolescents and children. One of her patients is a deaf orphan boy named Tom, who is indifferent towards her. After their session, Tom's guardian, Joan, informs Mary of Tom's transfer to a group home in Boston. Tom doesn't get along with the other kids in the orphanage as he gets violent, so Joan's superiors have no other choice but to move him. Saddened by the news, Mary still feels she needs to help Tom, but it seems like their progress is put to an indefinite halt. Before Tom and Joan leave, Mary fetches a scarf and a hat that once belonged to Stephen and gives them to Tom. Back in the clinic, Mary's receptionist, Lucy, hands her a brochure of a nursing home for Stephen. Night arrives, and Mary has a session with her therapist, Dr. Wilson. After careful consideration, Mary finally decides to put Stephen in a nursing home. For her, Stephen has become an emotionless body and a shell of the son she once loved. As much as she loves taking care of him, she feels like Stephen is no longer himself. After a while, Mary bathes Stephen and sings a lullaby. Her voice then starts to break, and at the same time, she submerges Stephen into the water. But suddenly, Mary opens her eyes and realizes she's only dreaming, and upon hearing a noise downstairs, she decides to check it out. After failing to find the source of the noise in the house, Mary goes outside to investigate further. Mary then hears a car's window shatter near her clinic, forcing her to call the police. However, as Mary approaches her vehicle, she sees Tom inside. She then receives a call from Joan, so she goes to her office to have some privacy. However, as they talk, Mary suddenly gets locked inside. Luckily, Mary has spare keys and quickly opens the door, but to her dismay, Tom has disappeared. Upon seeing the open door, Mary goes outside to look for the boy, only to return to the house without him. Morning arrives, and the sheriff assures Mary that a search for Tom will be initiated as soon as possible. That evening, Mary gets out of bed after hearing something outside. However, upon investigating, Mary finds nothing and decides just to return home. Then, she suddenly hears strange noises and gets scared, so Mary hurries back to the house. Unfortunately, Mary fails to lock herself in, for someone sticks in their hand before the door closes. When Mary opens it and sees Stephen, she eventually wakes up and realizes she's just had a nightmare. The following morning, Lucy catches Mary in Stephen's room, which she's just finished cleaning for Tom just in case he returns. Lucy then reminds her of a session with another patient, Aaron, so Mary eventually goes to her clinic. Frustrated, Aaron vents out about how he hates the attention Tom is getting. Distracted, Mary zones out as she stares at Tom's newspaper article, paying no attention to Aaron. After the session, Aaron's father, Doug, talks with Mary about Aaron's progress. He still has a long way to go, but Mary believes Aaron will accept his parents' divorce soon enough. Then, Doug asks Mary out on a date and urges her to ride out the oncoming storm with them. But due to ethical reasons, Mary turns him down. Thinking he offended her, Doug apologizes to Mary. Then, as Mary heads back inside, Doug sees Stephen staring at him by the window and quickly realizes his mistake. Night arrives, and while Mary tucks Stephen in, a sudden noise comes from the hallway. However, Stephen grips Mary's hand tightly, so she chooses just to ignore it. Then, in the middle of the night, Mary wakes up because she hears footsteps approaching her room. Mary fails to move when her door slowly opens, and upon seeing a figure of a young boy in the dark, she closes her eyes out of fear. When Mary opens them again and the figure disappears, she finally lets out a sigh of relief. However, seconds later, Tom shows up in the room and covers Mary's mouth, urging her to keep quiet. When morning comes, Mary shares her recent hallucinations with Wilson. He attributes her odd experiences to a condition called parasomnia, which triggers night terrors. Distressed, Mary starts to believe that Tom is dead and that his ghost haunts her. To explain what Mary is experiencing, Wilson states that the ghost might represent the actual child Mary has lost, Stephen. Tears then fall on her cheeks as she realizes that Wilson might be right. Before ending their session, Wilson asks for her blood sample as he plans to give her sleeping pills. Later on, Mary closes the crawl space door after noticing that it's open. Then, she opens the door for the nurse who will take her blood sample, and after the blood collection, Mary and Lucy take their afternoon walk. While doing so, they gossip about Doug, and Lucy convinces Mary to give Love another shot and call him. One night, Mary finally decides to invite Doug over for dinner. Mary then apologizes for acting rude during their last meeting, but Doug doesn't seem to mind it at all. He knows about Mary and Stefan's situation, and he empathizes with her as he relates to having a problematic teen. Dinner ends, and Mary is too tired to clean up. She then lies down on the couch, and just as she's about to sleep, she hears a door suddenly close. Although she feels dizzy, Mary gets up to check on her stepson. However, upon discovering that Stefan isn't in bed, Mary quickly panics and looks for him. Mary tries her best to look for Stefan despite feeling disoriented, and as she reaches the living room, she hears strange noises inside the house again. When she realizes the noises are coming from the crawl space, Mary reluctantly approaches the small door and opens it. But as soon as she opens it, Mary gets terrified when someone grabs her. Fortunately, she manages to break free and kicks the door shut before blocking it. The following day, Mary wakes up feeling groggy after sleeping in front of the crawl space door. She then goes to check on Stefan and sees scratches on his cheek, so she quickly calls Wilson to tell him that her hallucinations are in fact real. However, Wilson won't listen and thinks Mary is just latching on to irrational explanations. To cure this, Wilson plans to give Mary antidepressants as soon as he receives her blood test results. A snowstorm is brewing, and in the kitchen, Mary overhears the news about a boy of Tom's likeness spotted in Florida. At that moment, a heavy burden is taken off Mary's shoulders, and she breathes a sigh of relief. Later that day, Lucy gives Mary some supplies for the oncoming snowstorm. She then invites Mary and Stefan to take shelter with her, but Mary refuses and says they'll be fine. After that, Mary puts some firewood in their cast iron antique stove. Then, she goes down to the basement to get some lanterns in case of a power interruption. Down there, Mary hears a rumbling sound and footsteps upstairs. As she heads up, Doug surprises her and invites her and Stefan to spend the night with him and Aaron until the snowstorm is over. However, Mary politely refuses before bringing up Tom. She is relieved the authorities have already found the boy, but Doug informs her that that's a false alarm. Mary then gets anxious, so she asks Doug just to let himself out before returning to the basement to do some more work. However, when Mary fails to find the key to the storage, she uses a hatchet to strike the lock instead. Meanwhile, upstairs, Wilson is trying to call her, and after some time, Mary finally answers. Wilson has received Mary's blood test results, and he's disappointed to find out that Mary is taking drugs without his approval. He even accuses her of stealing Stefan's medication, but Mary has no idea what he's talking about. Feeling antagonized, she leaves the room but doesn't end the call. Once Mary is gone, Wilson notices that Stefan isn't in his wheelchair before seeing him crossing the room. Moments later, a sudden power outage causes Wilson to lose connection. He then desperately tries to call Mary, but she's stuck in the basement with only a lamp to help guide her way. It isn't long before she finally sees Tom in the storage, and as she gets scared and tries to flee, she almost bumps into Stefan. Mary can't believe that Stefan is standing up, but Stefan gives her no chance to react and quickly knocks her out. After taking Mary to the bathroom, Stefan bathes her naked and restrained stepmother. She then regains consciousness and tries to break free, but Stefan calms her down and tells her to keep quiet. However, as soon as Stefan removes the tape from her mouth, Mary screams for help. Startled, Stefan covers her mouth with his hand as he orders her not to scream, and Mary eventually calms down. He explains that he's just thanking Mary for taking care of him, for Mary has never left Stefan's side ever since the accident. Stefan didn't want that to end, so he faked not being able to speak and move. Unfortunately, those few months of having Mary only to himself ended when Tom came. Stefan feels that Mary has chosen Tom over him, so he's decided to get rid of the boy. However, Tom survived and found a way to hide in the crawl space. Because of Stefan's revelation, Mary realizes that it's Tom she's been hearing all along, and that she hasn't been hallucinating. Meanwhile, Stefan also confesses to constantly drugging Mary since Tom's arrival, and with pills in hand, Stefan drugs Mary again. Stefan then tapes Mary's mouth and promises that things will be back to normal soon, and Mary can only helplessly cry as Stefan leaves. Concurrently, Wilson drives through the snowstorm and calls the cops to check on Mary. Unfortunately, as he nears Mary's house, Wilson encounters a slippery road and loses control of his car before crashing into a pile of snow. Luckily, Wilson is barely harmed and continues to go on foot. On the other hand, Mary uses some shampoo to free her hands. Then, Mary chugs the same bottle to make herself throw up the pill she's taken earlier. Now out of the bathroom, Mary sneaks to the ground floor and tries calling for help, but she doesn't have a signal, and their landline is dead too. She then follows Stefan screaming from the basement, where she sees a dirty Tom tied up. Stefan is aware of her presence, and he confronts Mary about her plans to send him to a nursing home before approaching her with an axe in hand. This pushes Mary to reach for a gun she soon realizes isn't loaded, so instead, Mary uses its stock to knock Stefan out. She then quickly unties Tom, but Stefan gets up and grabs her by the hair before trying to attack the little boy. Luckily, Mary manages to hold Stefan down, allowing Tom to escape. Mary attempts to calm Stefan down as he believes that the accident has caused a sudden change in him, but his stepson admits to playing a role in his father's death. He wanted his father dead so he and Mary could be together, and while he hugs his stepmother and tells her they don't need anyone else, Mary knees him in the groin before escaping. After locking the basement door, Mary scours the entire house for Tom. She then finds him hiding in a closet, refusing to come with her due to fear. With no choice, Mary goes outside and leaves footprints in the snow to make it look like she left. Then, Mary puts away her boots and hides in the closet with Tom, just as Stefan gets out of the basement. Stefan looks outside and sees the footprints, but the snow Mary's left by the entrance leads him to her boots. Now that he knows Mary's trying to trick him, Stefan opens the closet with a hammer in hand, but fails to see his stepmother hiding behind the clothes. However, his search is interrupted when Wilson arrives. Unaware of the danger, Wilson heads inside and comes across Stefan's wheelchair. As Wilson finishes inspecting the chair, he turns around and gets stabbed by Stefan, who blames him for Mary's decision to send him to a nursing home. Still in the closet, Mary and Tom hear Stefan barricading the house and head upstairs to continue blocking the windows. After seeing him go up, Mary advises Tom to stay in the closet while she gets help. However, as Mary removes snow blocking the kitchen door, a dead and frozen Doug startles her. Whimpering in fear, Mary heads back to the closet and takes Tom to look for a way out. They also try their best to avoid Stefan, and eventually, Mary finds a dying doctor. Using whatever strength he has left, Wilson tells Mary to play along with Stefan's delusions and get Tom to safety. After finding that every door and window is blocked, Mary climbs up the kitchen table and breaks a skylight window. Stefan then hears this and runs downstairs to stop Mary and Tom from escaping, but the little boy has already managed to get up on the roof. To defuse the tension, Mary tries telling Stefan that she's made a mistake and admits to neglecting him, but Stefan only gets mad and pins her against the stove. Still, Mary continues to change Stefan's mind by saying she loves him, and as soon as he gets his guard down, Mary forces his stepson's hand on the burning stovetop. Hurt and infuriated, Stefan strangles Mary, but gets distracted by Tom dropping snow from the skylight. With no time to waste, Mary hits Stefan in the head with a pan and knocks him out before getting Tom down. She then removes the nails on the front door with a hammer and flees with the boy, unaware that Stefan's regaining consciousness. Meanwhile, Stefan quickly realizes that Mary and Tom are out of the house, so he quickly follows them and takes his hammer. Past the woods and near a lake, Mary stands in between Tom and Stefan. Tom tries to leave on a floating dock, but it's anchored to the main dock. He even attempts to break the chains while Mary holds off Stefan, but it's just useless. Meanwhile, Stefan overpowers Mary, even though she uses an oar to fight him, and jumps on the floating dock, making Tom lose his balance and fall into the water. He then starts drowning Tom, and as Mary struggles to stop him, she decides to hit his stepson on the head with a hammer. The blow instantly kills Stefan, and after Mary helps Tom, she watches Stefan's lifeless body float in the water. After some time, Mary visits the child adoption center with Tom. The boy shows Mary a drawing of a dog, asking for one, so Mary tells him she'll consider it. Finally, as they head inside the adoption agency, Mary assures Tom that everything will be okay.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.